Can you share your journey of how you landed into talent acquisition?
See, my journey into talent acquisition was not a straight line. I've had chemistry as my graduation main, but I was sure that I didn't want to continue anything in chemistry, not work in a lab. But I was very curious, an active member in my church in my hometown. I was part of the English choir, part of the youth group. One thing that I noticed is I loved interacting with people and I'm a talker. And in HR, in talent acquisition, it's all about people. I don't just hire. I build the talent engine that powers business growth, right? Because I believe that I change people's careers, which also impacts the family. So it's just not any.
So now it's time to talk about the TA folks who want to start their career in recruitment, right? So what advice would you have for some of the individuals who want to start their career in talent acquisition?
So talk like a business leader, so you're able to share the vision. Talent acquisition is all about relationships, right? It's not
Yes.
about pipeline. It's not about filling position. It's about relationship.
Hi everyone, welcome to I'm a Recruiter podcast. I'm your host, Prafulla Deori. I'm thrilled to have you with us today. I'm a Recruiter is more than just a podcast. It's a movement by and for talent acquisition professionals. And we are here to shake things up. Our vision is to create a seamless network of recruiters from classroom to boardroom. Our mission is to create a collaborative platform that connects and empowers any TA professionals, providing end-to-end support across talent acquisition landscape. If you're getting any value out of our content, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, share, and let us know what you think in the comment section. Let's build the community together. So with this, it's time to welcome our guest. So today we have a pleasure of hosting Tino Thomas, a distinguished talent acquisition leader with over 19 plus years of experience in scaling global hiring operations, branding, talent strategy. Tino currently serves as a senior leader, TA leader in Neiman Marcus Group, where he excelled in building scalable hiring strategy and driving talent acquisition transformation. His dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion has positioned him as a champion in fostering inclusive workplaces. In recognition of his contribution to the field, Tino was honored with the Top 100 HR Leader Award in 2024 by HR Success Story. So welcome, Tino. We are really excited to have you in I'm a Recruiter podcast. Looking forward for an interesting journey.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation. And I really appreciate you shortlisting me. I've seen some of the previous episodes or podcasts that you have managed. Being part of that journey as one of the member of I Am a Recruiter and being part of this conversation, it's a privilege. Thank you, and I appreciate for the opportunity given.
Sure. Thank you so much. Okay. So with interest of time, let's start to know a little bit about your journey. Can you share your journey of how you landed into talent acquisition? What inspired you to pursue your career in this particular field? If you can quickly brief us.
Sure. See, my journey into talent acquisition was not a straight line. I've had very interesting initial interview experiences post my graduation. There were a couple of interviews that I cleared, but I used to get rejected in HR. And I used to wonder, what's really happening? I cleared most of the business round, the technical round, but not the HR round. So this pondered me a little bit, and I used to chat with my friends, some seniors from the college, to understand what is really missing in that space. I was very keen doing technology. I liked technology when I wanted to do my graduation. But certain situations at home, I couldn't, and I ended up picking chemistry as my graduation main. But I was sure that I didn't want to continue anything in chemistry, not work in a lab. But I was very curious, an active member in my church in my hometown. I was part of the English choir, part of the youth group. One thing that I noticed is I loved interacting with people, and I'm a talker. And in HR, in talent acquisition, it's all about people, how you communicate, and how do you attract talent into the organization, right? So that's when this really came to my mind that HR is a space that I really want to step my foot in. But coming from a small town, I did see a little bit of challenge into directly streamlining into talent acquisition or HR, right? Not coming from the educational background as well. So I started in data entry. I've done customer service. I worked a little bit for call center. That was the booming time of call center, 24/7,
Yes.
and Aditya Birla, those transfers, those kind of organizations. Right? So I worked in background verification. I picked up conversations so early. I used to do 35 verifications per day. So that slowly transitioned into an interview with Accenture that I gave, where I worked for the customer service team internally. But I was so curious about recruiting. I learned US, UK sourcing. Then Target opened up their GCC in India, and I joined their US sourcing team and internally applied and moved to the core lateral hiring of talent acquisition in India. So that's how I landed in talent acquisition. Was it by chance? No, I think it was by choice. I definitely wanted to be in that space and I love recruiting. And I think that's why I stayed in that journey for so long. I have had experience in the other facets of HR as well, but not in a complete COE role, like moving into a company or HR business partnering. But I've managed some of those roles when we were initially growing as an organization. So that's been my journey into talent acquisition. And what I truly believe, I have a quote where I look at this, I don't just hire, I build the talent engine that powers business growth, right? Because I believe that I change people's career, which also impacts the family. So it's just not an individual that I change, I also change a big family. And it's the same experience that I've had as well. When someone gave me an opportunity to move internally, it also changed my family lifestyle, financial, experiential, those aspects. So that's how I landed in talent acquisition.
Nice. Interesting. Fit. Thank you for sharing how you landed into talent acquisition. But can you also tell a little bit about your background? Which place you belong to, where you were born and brought up, what education background you had? The question which I generally ask everyone, so that I believe that talent acquisition is one particular job or job function which any degree or postgraduate or any qualification person can do, right? So this is one of the very interesting topic which I generally ask every guest of ours. So wanted to know about you as well.
Awesome. So I was born in Kerala, brought up in KGF, Kolar Goldfield. It's a small town about 100 kilometers from Bangalore. A lot of people, when you say KGF, they remember the movie. Not exactly like the movie. It's a very nice place. And my dad worked in the Bharat Gold Mines Limited. BGML is what they call it. It's closed a couple of years back. So that's where I finished my graduation. I was very keen in learning computer science. Due to some situations at home, my mom was very clear that finish a degree. I don't care what degree you finish. It doesn't matter. So I finally signed up for chemistry. I was not very keen on commerce. So I come from chemistry background. So I did Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry. Yes, a different background can definitely land you into HR. Is there an overedge for people who come from a certain background? There could be, as long as understanding of some technology that you really get in hiring. But those are previously. Currently, you have so much of information out there and so much of learning avenues. Anybody from any background can definitely land into a talent acquisition, but you need to have the passion to hire, make a difference in people's career and your career as well. So if you're passionate, anybody can do recruiting or be in HR is what I personally feel.
Yeah, I agree. Like if you're not passionate about people, if you are not passionate about helping other people, it might look like a very monotonous job as well. And with lots of rejection, it might be a demotivating factor also, right?
Yes.
Considering there is lots and lots of competition out there in the market. So during our discussion, we have also mentioned about like scaling global operations, right? So what are some of the key challenges you have faced while scaling some of the global hiring operations, and how as a TA leader, you have addressed those challenges?
See, challenges could be multifaceted, but it's a mix of strategy, agility, your cultural intelligence that you bring. Few challenges that stand out is your talent supply and demand mismatch. So what do I mean by that is when you're hiring for niche tech or when you're looking for a digital transformation, some of the GCCs that I have worked will have a legacy tool that we are trying to transform. And we're looking for candidates who would want to be part of that journey. So candidates would have crossed that journey, learning new skill set, but you need to identify talent who are ready to be part of that journey, right? Who has gone through that career trajectory of from legacy system to the new technology, but join the organization, go through that journey and do the digital transformation for the organization. It's not a couple of months affair. It might take 1 or 2 years, and it's a global initiative that really happens. So how do you identify the supply and demand mismatch, and how do you work with the leaders in terms of more proactive talent pipelining instead of more reactive, for which you'll have to be up in the conversation with your business leaders, your global leaders, very close partnership with your HR business partners, your hand in hand with your comp and ben partner. You don't want to be in a situation where the global leader decided, the job description is created, there's a comp already identified, and then it comes to you and you get to inform, we need to hire 10 software engineers, but here are the 5 technologies that I need. And then you realize the market number is very different from what is being approved and how you want to hire. So getting into the constant fight between hiring manager and recruiter is something that I would really try and avoid for us to be more proactive in talent pipelining. And how do you build diverse hiring practices, right? So localize hiring strategies. Sometimes your global hiring process of having 8 rounds might not work locally when you have to hire talent. And when speed and quality is something that you want to focus, you need to have more diverse hiring strategies for India. It could be just 3 rounds and 4th round is a HR and an offer conversation. So how do you get your global leaders buy-in and also build that more localization into your hiring process. I would say it's close collaboration with business leaders. So you can't just be reactive, but how do you be more proactive? So that's some of the challenge that you will face in scaling an organization. You also need to work with your vendor partners in India. While GCC model typically looks at how do you set up an in-house function, not have too much of dependency on vendor partners, you need to have some of your partners and the right partners with you for you to build that brand. They also help you talk about your brand outside. Some of the GCCs that I have worked with, we wouldn't have ever heard of these organizations in India because you don't have a store or you don't have a setup here. So it becomes difficult for a candidate to relate to the brand. So those are the challenges, and how do you really work with those challenges?
Yes. Yes, I totally agree with all the points which you have mentioned. Definitely close collaboration with the business leader along with the HRBP is definitely very important to scale the global business, right? So when we are talking about demand and supply, there is one thing which came to my mind, which is about employer branding, right? How do we attract the top talent, right? So how do you approach employer branding and what strategy has proven effective in attracting some of the top talent based on your experience in multiple different organizations you have worked for?
See, employer branding is just not about, some people say it's a beautiful office, free food, transport, bean bags, and, separate space for collaboration. I truly believe it's employee advocacy. What do your employees say about you? And you can't force some of this, right? You can't tell your team members, go write a review and write this. They wouldn't do it. So how do you give that experience for them to proactively go and write about saying, you know what, I love working for this organization? And you will not get 100% hit shot in that. You will have misses because each individual will have different aspiration. For example, I might look at some organization which is close to my office and I don't care about title and I don't care about anything else. There are candidates who want, I don't mind traveling, but I need a good logo and I want a particular job, right? It's not about the money. So each expectations are different, but how do you have your employee talk about their authentic career stories from an organization? Now, how do you elevate this is definitely by your candidate experience. Letting a candidate ahead know you'll have 3 rounds of discussions. First 2 rounds will happen in this week. Third round is a very senior leader in the organization. You will have, late night calls, or there might be a little bit of reschedules because of how senior the leader is. Setting that expectation with candidate definitely creates an experience for them to understand, I know what I'm signing up for. If you keep them at dark, it doesn't give a good candidate experience, which indirectly talks about your brand as well, right? So your recruiting team creating that branding experience is very important. And also, how do you align with the larger brand? Your core brand will have certain persona globally. How do you not lose the persona, but also localize it and bring that brand experience to the candidates here in India as well, right? It could be, how do we constantly talk about our company values, belonging, which is DE&I, impact-driven initiatives. So it's about creating a culture that people want to be part of. And I truly believe for recruiting, the recruiters need to understand why are they part of the organization. So the why factor is something that I constantly ask my recruiting team, even while hiring them or when they are hiring for the organization. Tell the candidate why should they join. So openly tell them, hey, if you're looking for like a vice president title, this is not an organization for you. Here is the growths that we are looking for, and here's the journey that we have in mind. Are you up for signing up for the next 1 year in this process? If the candidate don't align to that why, then they wouldn't like your brand, right? Then it's only a fight between compensation. Somebody gave you so much, I'll give you so much, join me. They wouldn't be part of your journey and they might not relate to the brand and they will not be your advocate, right? So how does employee talk about this brand? Your hiring manager giving that experience. So we used to train our hiring managers in some of the GCCs. What do you talk in interview around? Some do's and don'ts and some things that you shouldn't ask a candidate, right? So the very sensitive topics or even conversations around, you stay here, why do you want to join here? That's up for the candidate to really decide if they want to move to some locations. But how do you remove bias? All of those talks about your brand. That's how you build an employer branding. It's not fancy post or the fancy things that I initially mentioned. So that's my take and experience in terms of how we build employer brand and what employee value proposition do we want to drive from India.
I totally agree. We can't, as a TA or as an HR person, definitely we can't force our employees to write something which they don't feel within, right? So definitely they should vibe with the culture and they should feel it from themselves, right? And if they feel, they would definitely go and share more and more about the organization, the culture, what they love, and they will try to talk.
This is very common, right? When somebody doesn't clear the interview, we don't close the loop properly. There's so much of topic around it on LinkedIn as well. We might not be able to give specific feedback because see what specific feedback I give for a candidate it doesn't mean the candidate don't have it. That didn't work for my organization, but the candidate has it, might work for a different organization. So that's why as a HR, we don't give specific feedback unless it's very specific to a technology gap that we have. But how do you close loop with the candidate also talks about your brand, right? And it's not only that, your exit also makes a lot of difference.
Yes.
You get very excited while onboarding. We have an amazing onboarding plan, 30, 60, 90-day touch points. How was your interview experience? You build a scorecard around it. But when they leave, if you don't give a good experience and you just, the olden days was take a print, go to different section, get a sign. Things have definitely changed, but how do you give a good experience? And how do you ensure the exit employee don't have to follow up on their payroll, on their PF, or any of those interactions that they want to have post they leave the organization? Also talks about your brand, right? Now, if I get that experience, I'm going to tell my friend, join the company. Don't worry. When I left, I had an amazing experience. Join them. You will like the culture. That's what you want to hear from a candidate, be it employee or a candidate.
Yes. Even it's been almost like 6-7 years. Probably I have left Adobe, but still I value their culture, their work ethics and everything. So whenever someone asks me about Adobe, definitely I am kind of a true advocate for them because the experience which I had while working there, the journey was really amazing. And I try to share those kind of things with the people who try to ask things about Adobe and all.
Wonderful.
So moving to our next question, you have worked with a global team. You have worked with a local team as well. When we work with both global and local team, there has been lots of process change as well. So can you also discuss about a project which you have transformed, which you have led, and which we have impact on the organization growth?
I'll talk more about experience. I don't know if I can directly relate to growth or share a number in terms of the impact, but one of the GCC that I worked, so my then TA leader that I reported to, he called me and he said, we are currently using Excel for any of our hiring needs. We really want to implement an ATS. I'm going to hand over this project to you, deliver it. I'm like, okay, this sounds very exciting, but I've never done it. So he mentioned one thing. He said, nobody does anything before unless they experience it. So he's like, I'm giving this to you as an experience, learn it. So I felt like I was thrown inside a well and I need to climb up and really understand ATS is not an easy thing, right? It's a huge thing. But I worked with so many stakeholders, right? From legal team to your IT, HR, your compliance team, and the local India team, again, in the IT team, because you have to do whitelisting of, your link to tagging it to a career site. So in parallel, I also worked with the leader to build, a career site for India, separate India career page. So I implemented ATS, which is job white, which made a huge difference in terms of how we hire. You can imagine capturing all of it in an Excel and then going back to a candidate, updating. You can never do a data-driven conversation with your hiring manager because collating information is such a huge task on Excel. While it's bread and butter of TA, a system can definitely solve a lot of things for you, right?
Yes.
So implementing that is definitely created a big difference in how you hire talent and how fast you hire talent. One number that I can share was we used to take about 65 days to make an offer. It reduced to 35 days to make an offer to a candidate because it was a seamless experience for candidate to apply, get information. The best thing about JobWhite that I experienced was it had an app which made it even more easy for hiring managers to review candidate, approve a rec, reject a requisition, approve an offer, reject an offer. So it was so easy for my hiring managers on the way to their home from office. If there are offers, they used to approve it on the app. And it made the experience so seamless. Job application ratio also increased, right? Before that, we used to use a third-party, tool, but that didn't talk so much about our brand. It spoke more about the other ATS. So candidates used to get confused, which company am I really applying for? So all of that got removed. So that was a big transformation, that I managed, which also led me to the next opportunity because they wanted someone who has implemented ATS. They wanted me to do that similar thing in the next organization that I got an opportunity in. That's a big transformation that I managed. More data-driven hiring approach, more predictive that we could do, more process optimization that we were able to manage. The next phase was integrating that to PeopleSoft. So the ATS and HCM, we were implementing that together because the system was broken. Now that we have two systems, it's from a hire to retire integration was happening. So that was a wonderful experience. We had like a room blocked. Every alternative day, the entire team would come in. We used to have a lot of samosa breaks and, have conversations to understand how do you align global process, but also localize it and make it a seamless experience. We definitely moved from exit formalities in a paper to system. So that transformation also happened. So that was an amazing experience. I learned a lot from that journey.
Yes, this is very interesting. Definitely not many TA manager or TA leaders have similar kind of experience. So can you also tell a little bit more about a few of the do's and don'ts when you are trying to implement some of the ATS tool? What are the things which you have to keep in our mind when you are trying it for the first time? Because you have a first time experience, and I'm sure there will be like lots of people who wanted to become a leader. And for them, they wanted to have those kind of experience, right? Probably this video can help them as well. Hey, these are the things which Tino have mentioned. So you have to be careful. And
While this was a while back, things are very different now, right?
that's fine, roughly.
Yeah. What I would say as a do is, see, first you need to identify what you want to solve for the organization, right? Because there's 15 ATS in the market, which one will help you solve the problem that you're looking to identify a solution for? We could have picked up Workday, but Workday, when you do, you can't just do local implementation. You need to do a global implementation. And Workday expenses could be very different, right? And the PeopleSoft that we were using was the integration, something that we will be able to do this year or next year. So one was, what are we trying to solve? And does the ATS help in that journey? And it should be a long-term journey. It shouldn't be like for the next year we are trying to solve. So we looked at 3-4 ATS in terms of what are they offering and what solves for what we are trying to resolve. So that is one. Second, integration between systems. Will that ATS help in integrate between systems, or it stops us from integrating? The third, how effective is that ATS? One is the UI UX experience for somebody applying for a job versus looking out for opportunities, or even answering those 5-6 questions that we typically ask in a candidate, right? Which could be like 10-11 questions globally, but how do you customize it to 5-6? So that entire UI UX experience is what you'll have to consider some of these points as a do when you look at an ATS. What you don't want is, don't bring a system which is very fancy, but it doesn't help, your global team or India team. Sometimes it might help the global team, but it doesn't work for India team. Right? For example, like Talio, a lot of global organization use. It's a nice tool, but it's the UI UX experience is not that great. You wouldn't get good data as well. It's very clumsy and difficult to create report. So don't pick a system. Now with so many ATS integration, AI, that a lot of topics are getting conversed in conferences and so many other places that this get discussed. Don't pick up a tool because somebody is doing it. For example, leave the ATS, right? If you have to look at an interview experience. Now, say an organization picked up an interview platform, which is helping them do interviews faster, and it is working for them for the goals that the organization has. But just because somebody implemented that tool, don't take that and try to implement in your organization. Because if your hiring manager, business leaders, and your own recruiting team are not aligned to that system, or they don't know how does the system really work, you implement, you will fail, because even candidate wouldn't go through that process. So don't build a fancy system if it doesn't solve the purpose or the larger goal that you're looking for. And don't build something just because you want to show it on your paper. While there are leaders who will go through the process and approve, build something which creates an impact. Don't build something fancy and which doesn't create an impact. People feel it's even more clumsy, or there's too much of information and I don't know how to use it. While I can go specific into some of those don'ts, but I'm happy to have conversation to say, okay, what are those nitty-gritties that you'll have to be really careful about, and how do you have conversation with your stakeholders on what are some don'ts that I would recommend when you're looking at some of these systems. But on a high level, this is what I would say.
Great input. So overall, what I understood is that every organization, the business use case might be different, right? So first we have to identify what problem we want to solve. And based on those use case, probably we might need to connect with our internal stakeholder to understand a little bit more, then probably go out in the market for the ATS tool, because there are tons and tons of ATS tool available. So first we have to identify what's our requirement and then go out. So with interest of time, moving to our next question. So during our discussion, and I have also seen in your LinkedIn profile as well, that you are a true champion of diversity and equity and inclusion as well. So what are the different initiatives you have implemented to promote diversity, equity, inclusion within your teams in the organization you have worked for?
One is definitely building an inclusive hiring culture. Now it starts from top, right? The messaging should definitely come from top. So there's consistency of message. Your hiring team just cannot push this through. When it is top down, it works more effective, and there's a leadership message. So one of the GCCs, what we did was, when we wanted to hire people, less vision, it's not about just informing the hiring leaders and say, let's challenge our leadership team and hire somebody. It's just not about hiring, making a post, putting it on LinkedIn and say, hey, we are doing all of this and we are an amazing organization. But what's the journey for the individual that we hire for the rest of the time with the organization? So we worked with facility team, our security team. We even worked with the office, the building facilities team to understand, is that location feasible for somebody with this approach? Will we be able to hire? Because you can't just hire in a company which is in fourth floor and then you identify, oh, the person can't use the lift or there is no ramp for the person to use who's on a wheelchair. So how do you look at this approach more broad and try to solve? If you're not able to solve, I would say don't pick up, right? Don't do it now. You'll have to work backwards, identify, and then work towards it. In one of the GCCs that I work, we have hired, so I call more belonging, so that we have diverse people that we have hired. But before we do that, we worked with the belonging team and co-created programs where the larger organization can understand and the teams can also understand what is belonging and how do you work with individuals from different backgrounds. Don't treat anybody differently, right? I've heard stories of organizations where they've hired and the person had very different experience. It got escalated and they were not able to hire for next few years from certain diverse backgrounds. But one thing that we definitely looked at was how do we increase gender diversity specifically and how do we hire people from veteran military background. We targeted our approach, but not pushing to recruiters to say this typically happens, right? Hiring manager says, I want to increase my diversity in my team. If you're submitting 8 profiles, 4 should be women candidates. It doesn't work like that. Data-driven approach definitely works. For cyber team, when we wanted to set up, the leadership team wanted to hire more gender diversity candidates. We went with market data and we said, if there's only 10 or 12% sign up for such course, which will take next 3 years for the individual to come out in the industry, how do you expect for us to hire somebody at 30% gender diversity in the function? But we definitely looked at, as a larger organization, just not at individual contribution where we build gender diversity. We also looked at leadership level and how do we build future internal leadership pipeline? Is the organization ready to give flexible approaches for some of the functions? So we worked with business leaders, like in finance leadership team, we worked together and we had flexible approaches for the women candidates that we hired because people typically go through a journey, right? Because I'm married, my wife went through those journey as well. So I am able to relate to that scenario. And the business leader has a family, they were able to relate to that scenario. And it was sensitized to the larger function within finance as well to say, here is the approach we are taking. So everybody understood. That's how you drive belonging or DEI initiatives. It's just not about going somewhere or finding a vendor, hiring and saying, yeah, like 30%. And then 4 months, 6 months down the line, you see Glassdoor review going completely bad because one, the employee joined is not happy, or the internal team is not happy. So how do we co-create that experience and make it more personalized for the larger organization? So I was successfully able to increase from 18% to 25 and then 30% from gender diversity specific, targeted approach in terms of hiring from campus. And we did that to ensure we bring in diverse panel and diverse workforce within the organization. Especially in technology, we used to have women panels as well. And I'll tell you, we have had women hiring managers rejecting candidates from that background as well, because they purely looked at hire for the right talent and skill, not force fit to say, okay, I am low on gender diversity, let's hire them. So that's how you bring a balance and you're still able to be successful in terms of some of those percentages that you want to meet.
But again, like when you are setting up a new team, a new GCC, let's say, right? So in India, like finding the diverse leadership is something very challenging as well, right? When you are setting up the things, because you don't have anyone to showcase those story, right? And when you are calling a diverse leadership to join, it's sometimes very challenging because for them, like they want thing. For example, we have read many articles where female leader or in general females, they look for 100% match in the job description, right? Whereas male, hardly 40-50%, if it's match also, they will go, right? So how do you attract some of the diverse leader when you are building some of the GCCs or in general, some of the organization in India?
You need to fix it right from your job description. So there are bias in your job description. We used a tool called Textio, which helps you remove those bias, right? And it was a good learning for me as well. I didn't know some statements will restrict from somebody applying for a job because it's very male-driven comment. We ensured our job description scored 70 and above. So it's more neutral. Who's our CIO? What do they do? What's our organization? What's our persona? Then we spoke about the job description. So our job description was 2-page, which had company logo, a beautiful script from the leader. It's not something that we drafted and we said, okay, we're going to add this in the JD. It looks fancy. But we got the note from the leader, like an authentic note to say, who am I? If you join my team, what do you get? So our job description was very different when you had to hire senior women leaders. And the same thing, we told them why you want to join the organization, what will excite you, and what we want you to drive. So we were able to hire a women leader in the cyber space. The leader worked in core cyber organization. Moving out of there and joining a GCC to join a vision and build that function. That was in a true experience to hire that women leader. Similarly, in another GCC, we hired somebody in the technology operations space. We were able to tell the same story, why we want to set up a technology operations team, what is the growth that we're looking for. The leader joined and scaled the organization to a different level. So that why factor is very important to attract talent. One of the leader relocated, which you would ideally not see somebody more settled, family being there, relocating to Bangalore and join that function. So we have had leaders that we have hired that way. So it talks about the persona. How do you build that experience? Your brand as an organization. All those are important for you to hire senior women leaders. That's that in itself is a story where the leader talks about what happens within the system, right? So you inspire the other women associates outside to join those functions. So we have, I don't want to name the organization, but we have hired many women leadership, in that space. And my current organization are heavy on women leaders. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing, So we have been talking about diversity. We have talked about career transformation. We have also talked about employer branding. So now it's time to talk about the TA folks who want to start their career in recruitment, right? So what advice would you have for some of the individuals who want to start their career in talent acquisition?
I'm sure it'll be a big laundry list, but I've heard, number 3, anything 3, people will remember, or that's something that's more impactful is what I have learned and understood. So I'll tell 3 things, right? One is, master the fundamentals. This is what I truly believe. And I recently wrote an article about it as well on LinkedIn. See, irrespective of your background, irrespective of the domain that you work, if you're able to hire in a retail, you can also hire in a pharma, is what I believe, right? And you can also hire in the semiconductor industry. Because end of the day, hiring process is the same, irrespective of domain. There might be difference in terms of where you go and hire. So I would say master the fundamentals, because your understanding of market trends, employer branding, analytics, data-driven approach is the same. So build that fundamental strong, right? Second, I would say think like a business leader. Don't talk like a recruiter. And I've heard this in some of the roundtables from CEOs who have spoken about this. Long discussions have been had before where we say, TA don't have a seat at the table. We have a seat at the table, or we miss sometimes having a seat at the table. So how do you talk business language? So you need to have strong business acumen. So if you're picking up a phone, talking to a candidate to say, hey, I have a role for a software engineer, this is the function, you'll join and you will do so many test cases, etc. And then you say, what's your combo, what's your notice period, what's your expectation? It'll not fly, right? Because then you go back to the hiring manager and say, I spoke to 20 people, only 5 are interested. You rejected 2, then I don't know what else to do, right? And then your hiring manager will escalate because it's been 2 weeks, nothing is happening. So how do you talk like a business leader? It's for you to understand that function really well. So talk to your hiring manager outside the JD. How does your day look like? What do you do when you work on this project? What's the impact? If you don't do it, how does it impact the larger goal? I remember having conversation with some of my hiring managers where we were looking for, so we had the POS kiosk, the point of sale kiosk. We had a testing lab here in India. So I visited the testing lab to understand what is point of sale, how does point of sale happen, how does the code really work in the POS machine. So if something doesn't work, how does it impact? Then I was able to relate why the hiring manager is saying no to certain candidates. So my questioning and screening process changed when I looked for candidates. Similarly, when I worked for a healthcare division, we had an ODC. I used to work with the hiring manager to understand PACS is a skill that they were looking for. So I was trying to understand from the hiring manager why you're looking for this skill. What will happen if they don't have this skill? Can we not train them? And then I spoke about market data, right? So the leader explained the impact of not understanding that skill. They said your heart will show, instead of left, it will show in right, and the doctor can do a wrong operation. So that's how huge impact it has. So my story changed with the candidate as well. I told the candidate, you are going to create impact for somebody's life during a surgery. That's the impact you create in this process. So I spoke more business language with the candidate. I sold the business story to the candidate versus the company, right? Instead of saying, we have this benefit, we give free snacks, your transport is free, our insurance is 6 lakhs, you have top up. Those are common. A lot of organizations do it, they give it. But how do you tell the larger story? So talk like a business leader so you're able to share the vision. Talent acquisition is all about relationship, right? It's not about pipeline. It's not about filling position. It's about relationship. And I've learned through the process as well. As you grow in your career, as more senior you become in your experience or your role, connections are very important for you to even land a job, right? For you to refer someone, you might not be able to find a lot of success in just applying in career side. You need referrals. So that's how you build connections. A simple note from hiring manager in their network will land you good candidates. Yes. You don't even have to write fancy notes on LinkedIn to say, I'm looking for so-and-so person with so much of experience. You tag your hiring manager, the hiring manager is going to just like, or at the max repost. But I've had hiring managers where they picked up the phone and they reached out to some of their network and we got 3-4 referrals. And 2 of them joined and they're still with the company. Right? The leader moved out, but they're still with the organization because the brand is so attractive. So those are the 3 things. Build relationship, not just pipeline. Think like a business leader, master the fundamentals.
Yes, definitely. I think those 3 things, if someone can master, definitely he or she can be a super TA folk in the recruitment industry, I would say. Okay, so moving to the next question, as a TA leader, we heard lots of things in and around TA, which is emerging, right? Let's say AI, heard lots of around AI, we heard lots of ups and downs in the economy as well, right? So what emerging trends do you foresee in talent acquisition and how can professionals prepare for them for the future, I would say?
CT is definitely shifting from a transactional hiring to talent intelligence, right? AI and automation is here to stay. AI and human will coexist. I know there is a lot of scare around, will AI completely remove my process? It will augment how we work. Now, if I'm spending a lot of time sourcing, AI will help source better. I have followed some of the folks who talk about how do you source better Boolean searches instead of we spending so much time. And there are some of the bias in Boolean that you write as well. So how do you use AI system to build amazing Boolean searches and do a targeted sourcing to identify talent? It'll shorten my time in terms of how I interview. Because if there are 4 other competitors of mine who have implemented AI tool and they are able to interview faster, and if I take 5 days to interview somebody, imagine the experience you're creating, right? And where would the candidate go? So AI and automation is here to stay. How do we leverage and focus more on strategy and candidate engagement? Skill-based hiring is something that I've heard a lot in roundtables and conferences. Pedigree is not being looked at more. I wouldn't standardize across, but I've heard this more often from senior leaders as well to say skill-based hiring is going to get more prominent in the market. More impact-based is what will get picked up. And you'll have to hyper-personalize your candidate experience, like the interview experience that I spoke about. How do you personalize your candidate experience journey will help you to hire talent better, faster, with good quality as well. So those are some of the trends that I see, and agentic AI is being spoken about. I've seen some of the demos where your operations executive will be able to look at data much deeper versus just trying to solve a ticket. So there's this one organization who spoke about, they had some last 5-year ticketing data, which they fed into the agentic AI. Now the ticket solution from 3 days has become, I think, in 5 minutes. So imagine the amount of information they have in such short span of time, what that executive or individual is able to do with that information. And it can give you live dashboard in a particular format. That's how agentic AI is evolving. So we'll have to upskill ourselves and be with the changes that's happening. So you're able to be with the trend. Those are the things that I've noticed and identified from my conversations or roundtables or the conferences that I've attended and learned.
Yes. So since you have mentioned about agentic AI, right? So there are few AI models which I have seen, for example, which can take the screening round of interviews as well, right? There are some of the models which I have seen which can help you in sourcing as well, right? So let's say if we have seen the agent can book tickets now, right? So if the agent can book tickets, definitely they can schedule interviews as well. Right. They are doing the screening call. They are doing scheduling. So let's say if AI is involved almost 50% or let's say 60% in the TA role, in that case, what the TA folks should be focused on?
See, I see a shift in how TA operates, right? We'll become more talent business partner. So it's no more just sourcing, interviewing. While some of the systems can help you all of this, you would still need somebody to have conversation and offer. While some of us might challenge to say that can also be done by a bot, then it'll be like me as an individual. If I'm having conversation with the bot on the number, I'll have conversation, get the offer, and I'll do similar conversation with so many others. While the agent might be able to tell you, here's the persona, here's the reaction from the candidate. So the person might not be able to join you. So you create backup offer. Backup offer is what I feel future will might lead to, but you would still need a human to give that personal touch experience on the brand and all of those aspects. Why talent business partner I mentioned was you would also look at how do you retain some of this talent? How are they performing within the organization? I'm not talking about stepping into a business partnering role, but how do you co-work with your business partner and look at elevating your role? So you'll have to elevate yourself into those roles to understand how do we work with our learning and development partner and hire the talent, right? You can't just hire and then figure out what to do with the associate, and your L&D team is what to upskill these resources. So how do we upskill our internal talent? And talent acquisition is part of it. Talent business partners or talent strategist will be the future role. So you'll have to upskill. And it happens like before as well, right? Somebody who joins that sourcing role wouldn't want to be in sourcing role. They want to go to a recruiter role. then a senior recruiter role, then they want to move to a leadership recruiter role where they are able to hire only leaders, because those hirings are very different. That's how the transition will happen, is what my understanding is from what I have learned and observed.
Yes. Thank you so much. With interest of time, I just have three last questions. We'll try to wrap it up soon. So you have been a mentor and you have spoken multiple times as well. And you have also mentioned in your LinkedIn profile as well about mentorship and other details, right? So how has mentorship played a role in your career, and how do you approach mentoring other in the field?
See, mentorship is very important. I learned it initial days of my career as well. And you can't just have one mentor, right? You need to have multiple mentors. And it need not be like an official mentor, like how some of the organizations create for you, like a mentorship program organizations run. I have a mentor, or I have a good friend where I call and crib about things. So this individual helps me just listen and share some inputs, and I get motivated for the next 6 months. So I have a mentor for that, who typically guides me in terms of how do I channelize my thought? Is my thinking proper? I have a mentor who helps me guide through my career to say, okay, where am I? Where do I want to reach? What do I want to do? What's the process? Am I in the right path? Or do they suggest another mentor for me to work with? And you'll have to identify mentors who have had similar journey like yours. If someone has grown super fast, you choose that person as a mentor. You might not be able to relate to that journey. Now, if I'm in a journey and I want to reach somewhere, someone who's done that kind of mentorship will help you. What best? Growth really happens when we pass on knowledge and lift others up, right? So what you learn, you should also pass. But you can't force somebody to say, hey, come, I'll mentor you. I've heard some of them saying, see, you need to earn respect at the table for TA. You can't ask a hiring manager, I didn't like the way you spoke to me. You need to earn that respect. So how do you mentor somebody as well, is for somebody to notice you, how you have scaled, and they reach out to you, say, I like the journey. I am in a similar process. Will you be able to mentor me? And that's a good way to pass on knowledge. And as a leader, you are in that process, right? You mentor your team members. And one thing that I've learned as a leader is, see, you handhold, but you'll have to let go somewhere.
Yeah.
You can't hold hand every time or through the journey. And my leadership style is, you typically have the recruiter go and address all the issue with the hiring manager, run the entire hiring report, also get the beating from the hiring manager. So you are able to predict some of these conversations. And it's not about taking the entire team's effort and showing yourself as an amazing leader in front of the hiring managers, right? So that's how mentorship really help. And identifying the right coach is also important, because some of your senior leaders might be difficult to get their time, but you have to be really crystal clear when you get their time to understand, here are two things that I want to talk about. Here's my current journey. This is the next journey that I'm looking for. Here is the three approaches. Is this correct? Guide me. Right. So those one coach or two coach can help you elevate yourself to the next level as well. So that's how mentorship is important, and mentoring others also helps you grow that knowledge.
Okay. So moving to our next question, which is focused on continuous learning. So to survive in the market, definitely in this competitive market, I would say specifically, we have to keep ourselves updated about the latest tools and technologies, and we have to develop our skills accordingly, right? So what resources do you recommend to some of our TA folks who, let's say, have started, or let's say want to become a leader? Any recommendation for them?
Data-driven conversation is what I will say. It's very important, because then you can substantiate to what you're referring to instead of sharing emotions. Talk about data. One thing that industry reports, like LinkedIn Talent Insights, right? In 24, they spoke about how or cloud engineer roles will become more in demand. It also spoke about how only 12% is increased in talent availability, right? So if there is 35% increase in hiring for AI engineers, there's only 12% of your talent who's ready with that skill. So there is a gap. So that's a beautiful data for you to talk to your leadership, your hiring managers, and let them know, hey, if you're planning to hire AI engineers, here's the skill gap. And you just have to go to, now if I have three competitors, how I do it, I go to their job site, career site, and I look at what are the jobs they have. What skill set are they hiring for? And if there are 4 other organizations who are hiring for similar skill set, I would do comparison to my org and understand which logo is more famous, what are their benefits, comp structure, who is a good paymaster, and why would they join me? That's a good data for you to talk to your leaders and understand, is this the hiring that we want to do this quarter, or do we want to hire next quarter? So I proactively build a passive pipeline. So your industry trends like LinkedIn Insight will really help you. Second is Gartner HR Trends is something that I refer to as well, which talks about, like the recent one which said, or the one that I remember is 76% of HR leaders believe their current hiring process don't align with business needs. That's a good indicator for you to identify, is my hiring process aligned to the business need? Because if my head of IT wants to hire 100 people in the next quarter, is my hiring process aligned to it, or it's like completely different, right? If my hiring process is not aligned, then the fight begins. 100 is not achieved, right? Podcast and webinars, definitely. the podcast that you have done, I have got good learnings from that as well. Some of the folks who have shared their experience, the conversations that we have in I Am a Recruiter WhatsApp group or the other WhatsApp group that I'm part of has good amount of information, right? Like recruiting future, talking about AI in hiring, bias reduction, how do you do it? LinkedIn Live webinar is another information, like the rise of employer branding in 24. LinkedIn had that information, right? Third is peer network. And I'll tell you, the roundtable discussion TA conferences, I'm not saying I'm demotivated, but you feel you don't know a lot of information. There are so many people out there who have live experiences, live examples to share. Like in one of the roundtable, I understood some of the organizations have already started implementing AI, and they're talking about face recognition to understand an employee's mindset. Are they stressed out, not stressed out? And they're using AI engineered app, which talks about the employee mood. And it suggests, hey, you need, a coach. You need to visit a practitioner. Now, unless you have some of these roundtable or conferences that you attend, you wouldn't even know about this, right? Like we wouldn't think about going and searching it on Google. So you need to have a curiosity mindset. I like this from Kunal Shah from Cred, who talks about how people are not curious anymore. He mentioned an interesting thing about how do I do is something which is becoming very less of a search in Google. Before, people used to do a lot of search around it. So roundtable, sticking to the question that you asked, roundtable and engaging TA leaders with conferences, you get a lot of learning there. And I learned, one of the senior leader mentioned this. How do you learn a lot? One is by reading. Second is by having a lot of conversation. If you just talk to people, you will learn a lot.
Yes.
And if you see leaders like S.V. Nathan, and I like Gopal Iyer, who talks about some of these, information. There's Vikas, who does podcast and he talks about information. I like Ashfaq. If you see his information,
Yes.
he differentiates between prompt and prompt engineering. Now, if you don't see some of this information, you'll not even know. Because I'll tell you, I had that prompt engineering is for core engineers, is what people would typically feel. Right? He talks about what's the difference in prompt and prompt engineering and how do you create an amazing Boolean search and how talent, the candidate pipeline differs. That's how I keep myself updated. Being more active on LinkedIn and some of these industry reports versus not fancying it, Insta and other things. I do balance between social media and some of this, learn, unlearn, rewind, some of those aspects. But that's how I keep myself updated and having conversation with other peers in the industry.
So with this, thank you so much, Tino, for such an insightful discussion. Personally, I have learned it a lot throughout about your journey, how you have scaled different global organization, the importance of employer branding as well, right? And how you have implemented the ATS as well, right? And why before implementing, you should understand the business need as well, right? Why it is important. Then we also spoke about like diversity and how to attract diverse talent, starting from the creation of your job description using Textio and other different tools and other things as well, right? Then we also talked about individual who wanted to start their career in talent acquisition, right? How we can keep ourselves updated in this emerging talent, right? You also mentioned about like the importance of mentor and how it should align to your aspiration, because if it is not aligned, definitely you might not get much help from their mentor, which you want to get the help from.
Right.
And last, continuous learn and other things from different conferences and other things. Thank you so much, Tino. But one last question. So any tips or about I'm a Recruiter community? What do you think about I'm a Recruiter community and why?
There are so many professionals in I Am Recruiter community. It's not concentrated to a certain level or experience, right? We have people at different facets, different domain who are part of this community. And I love the conversations that we have. We share experiences, we share surveys. You ask good questions about this is the trend. What are your, thoughts and references? It's an amazing place where people share their experiences, like how we are having conversation, right? There's good learning that I have had from you as well. Amazing questions. I've never thought through so deep. When you ask some of those is when I had to think about some of those experiences as well. And people share jobs of open requirements in the other, industry or within the HR fraternity. People share profiles, which is really nice, where you're trying to help each other, where you help the others in your network, not only resumes, but also technology profiles that I've seen, someone who's out of job, and you never know, there might be others who are able to help with them and an opportunity in their network or their current organization. And I love the meetups that you do, the conversations from there, the inputs. I get a lot of learning from I Am Recruiter community. That is why I'm part of it, because information is not just going and reading somewhere, right? It's also understanding from your community what others are doing. Now, imagine if you have to talk to 200, 300 people, how much of information would you really remember? But when you see it every day, and it's a very active community. I Am a Recruiter is very active. People constantly ask questions or they give suggestions as well. That is why I love this community. And you are doing an amazing job of talking to different people, having those surveys, and keeping this community so engaged. with your current job that you're doing is really awesome. And thank you so much for giving me an opportunity, in having this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed how we spoke more, and I was able to share my experiences, and you shared about what you learned from that experiences while you were working as well. And I would say continue doing it. You should talk to more people. We will learn more from the others' experience as well.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much, Tino. I know we have crossed half an hour more, but it was such an insightful discussion. So I thought, let me not stop you. And instead of keep asking those questions, and we will just past more than 30 minutes. But once again, thank you so much. It was an interesting discussion. Looking forward for more connect and more discussion through panel discussion or meetups or whenever required. We'll definitely reach out to you. But once again, thank you for your time, Tino.
Thank
It
you
was
so
an
much.
interesting discussion.
Pleasure is mine, and I really appreciate for giving an opportunity. Thank you, and you have a wonderful day and week ahead.